There's something about the rain, how it can hold a silence that feels almost sacred. In Devon, England, where the fields roll out in shades of deep green and the air smells faintly of damp earth, the rain has always been a part of life. But on one particular November evening in 1997, that familiar sound became the quiet witness to something unspeakable. Before we dive in, let's know which part of continent you are watching and listening from and what time it is at this moment. Subscribe, like and hit the notification bell. Thank you. Let's proceed. Her name was Kate Bushell. 14 years old. Bright, thoughtful, a girl who loved to sing and play guitar, who walked her dog every evening through the peaceful lanes outside Exeter. She was the kind of person people remembered for her calm, that quiet energy that made others feel safe. And maybe that's what makes what happened to her so difficult to understand. It was a Saturday, November 15th. The air was cool, the sky a gray watercolor. Kate put on her blue anorak, clipped the leash to her dog Gemma, and stepped out of her family home on Burrator Drive. It was just before dinner, one of those moments that felt routine, ordinary, forgettable, until it wasn't. Her father would later say that he could still hear the door closing that evening. Just that soft click. No one could have known that it was the last sound he'd hear before everything changed. When the dog came back alone, muddy, frantic, the leash still attached, her parents knew something was wrong. They searched the nearby fields with flashlights cutting through the mist. The sound of the rain muffled their calls. Kate. No answer. Just the steady rhythm of drops falling onto grass and gravel. Hours later, under the weak beam of police torches, they found her body in a field off Exwick Lane. Her throat had been cut. Her coat torn. Her life stolen in silence. There was no sign of struggle. No sign of robbery. No clear motive. It was as if someone had been waiting there, hidden in the drizzle, between hedges and shadows. The countryside that once felt so peaceful was suddenly a place of dread. Parents kept their children close. Dog walkers changed their routes. And Exwick Lane, once a simple shortcut through the fields, became a name whispered with unease. In the years that followed, detectives searched for answers. They spoke to hundreds of witnesses, followed hundreds of leads. But every time they thought they were close, the rain seemed to wash the trail clean again. The man in the blue jacket. The white van parked near the field. The reddish hair. Details, fragments, whispers, never enough to bring her back. Tonight, as you listen to the rain outside your own window, imagine that same rain falling over the quiet fields of Exeter. Falling on hedgerows and muddy lanes. Falling on a place that still remembers what happened there, even when the world has moved on. Because somewhere in that sound, that endless, soft rhythm of rain, is the echo of a life that ended too soon, and a question that still waits for an answer. Who killed Kate Bushell? And why? To understand the tragedy that unfolded that November evening, you have to picture Exeter, a quiet cathedral city tucked in the heart of Devon. It's the kind of place where life moves gently, where the countryside hums with the soft sound of rain on stone walls, and where everyone, somehow, knows everyone else. In 1997, Exeter wasn't the kind of town that made headlines. It was safe, predictable, the kind of community where children could walk their dogs alone, and neighbors still waved from across the road. The air smelled of wet leaves and chimney smoke. The local shops closed early. The nights were calm, and the loudest thing you'd hear was the wind brushing against the hedgerows. It was in this quiet town that Kate Bushell grew up. She was just 14, thoughtful, kind, and full of promise. A student at St. Thomas High School, where teachers described her as bright and curious. She loved music, especially playing the guitar, and dreamed of performing one day. Friends remembered her as gentle but confident, always ready with a smile, the kind of person who could sense when someone needed kindness. Her parents, Suzanne and Jerry, were loving and protective, but not overbearing. They trusted their daughter. Kate was responsible, grounded. The kind of girl who did her homework on time, who took care of her golden retriever, Gemma, with devotion. Walking the dog in the evenings had become her small ritual, a quiet time to think, to unwind after school, to breathe in the cool countryside air. The route she often took, along Exwick Lane, was one of those scenic, peaceful paths just outside town. A narrow country road lined with hedges and patches of farmland. In summer, it was full of birdsong and the buzz of insects. In autumn, it carried the scent of damp soil and fallen leaves. To locals, it was harmless, familiar. To Kate, it was just part of her world. But the comfort of routine can sometimes hide the sharpest dangers. In the weeks before her death, a few residents had mentioned seeing strangers in the area, men who didn't belong, vans parked in odd places. No one thought much of it at the time. Exeter wasn't the kind of place where terrible things happened. Until that evening proved them wrong. As the rain fell that night, the little details of her life, her neat handwriting, her favorite songs, her laughter, became part of a story that no one could make sense of. Because there was no reason. No clear motive. Just a moment of unthinkable cruelty in the middle of ordinary life. After her death, the town changed. People began locking their doors earlier. Parents walked with their children instead of letting them go alone. And Exwick Lane, once a place of calm, became a quiet scar across the landscape. A place that still holds its breath when the rain begins to fall. Kate's story isn't just about a murder. It's about innocence interrupted, about a small town learning that even the safest places can carry shadows. And as the investigation began, it quickly became clear that whoever did this hadn't come and gone by chance. Someone knew that lane. Someone watched her. And someone, somewhere, still remembers what they did. November 15, 1997. A Saturday that began like any other in Exeter. The kind of day where the sky stays gray from morning to dusk, and the air smells faintly of rain and leaves. For Kate Bushell, it was a simple weekend. She spent the morning doing chores, chatting with her parents, and planning her evening. There was nothing unusual, nothing that hinted at what would come. Her golden retriever, Gemma, paced near the door that afternoon, restless, waiting for her walk. Around 4:30 p.m., Kate zipped up her blue jacket, slipped on her trainers, and clipped the leash onto Gemma's collar. She told her parents she wouldn't be long. The rain had lightened to a mist, the kind that feels like a whisper against the skin. It was a short walk, one she'd taken countless times before. Through Exwick Lane, a quiet stretch that curved gently between hedgerows and open fields. A few people saw her that evening. One witness recalled a girl walking briskly, her bright jacket standing out against the gray backdrop. Another remembered a man, tall, with reddish hair, loitering near a white van parked along the lane. At the time, no one thought much of it. A man. A van. A girl walking her dog. Just pieces of an ordinary evening. But by 5 p.m., the sun had vanished completely. The lane grew darker, the kind of early winter darkness that comes quickly, swallowing everything. Somewhere along that path, something, or someone, stopped Kate. The details of what happened next are still unknown. There were no clear signs of struggle. No screams heard through the drizzle. Just silence. And the sound of rain hitting the leaves. At home, time passed quietly until it didn't. When Gemma returned, her fur wet, her leash dragging, her eyes wide, panic spread through the Bushell home like a chill. Jerry and Suzanne called her name into the night, their voices echoing against the empty fields. Neighbors joined, torches in hand, their lights cutting through the rain. Just after 7 p.m., the search ended. In a field near Exwick Lane, beneath the cold, steady rain, they found her. Kate's body lay in the grass. Her throat had been cut. Her coat torn. There was no sign of her killer. Police sealed off the area. Forensics worked through the night, their flashlights flickering across the soaked earth. Every movement was careful, deliberate, as if the ground itself might tell them who had done this. But the rain washed away footprints, traces, possibilities. The killer had chosen the perfect moment. When daylight was gone, and the weather would cover their trail. By dawn, news had spread through the town. An entire community awoke to shock and disbelief. Teachers wept. Neighbors whispered. And parents held their children a little closer that morning. No one could understand how something so violent could happen here, in such a quiet place, to someone like Kate. There was grief. There was anger. But more than anything, there was confusion. Because nothing about it made sense. Not then. Not now. And as the investigation began, the questions only deepened. Who was the man by the lane? The one with the van? And why, all these years later, does no one know his name? When the police arrived at Exwick Lane, the rain had eased into a mist, thin enough to see the flashing blue lights against the damp night sky. Detectives stepped carefully across the muddy ground, aware that every footprint could matter, and that every drop of rain could destroy what they needed most. They cordoned off the area, their torches flickering over the hedgerows. Kate's body lay just a few yards from the lane, her blue jacket torn, her glasses nearby. There were no signs of robbery. No evidence of sexual assault. No reason that anyone could see. It looked calculated. Quiet. Fast. The forensic teams worked into the early hours, but the weather had been merciless. The constant drizzle had washed away most traces, any footprints, tire marks, or fibers that could have pointed to her killer were gone. The only thing left behind was the horror of what had been done. By morning, Detective Superintendent Paul Bergen of Devon and Cornwall Police was leading one of the largest murder inquiries the region had ever seen. The case was named Operation Rebus, and more than 100 officers were assigned to it. They went door to door, asking questions, collecting statements, searching for anything that didn't fit. Over time, a few threads began to emerge. Witnesses recalled seeing a man with ginger or reddish hair, possibly in his 40s, loitering near the lane that afternoon. He was described as scruffy, possibly wearing a blue jacket. Some said he'd been seen watching young girls in the area before. Then there was the white van, old, possibly a Ford Transit, parked along the road near where Kate had walked. Its driver was never identified. When police appealed for information, dozens of white vans were checked, owners interviewed, but the one they needed was never found. As weeks passed, detectives followed hundreds of leads. They questioned known offenders, drifters, and residents. They tested DNA samples, hair, fibers, anything that could match the evidence from the scene. But the results were inconclusive. Every clue dissolved into uncertainty. The town changed in those weeks. Posters went up across Exeter, "Who killed Kate?" printed in bold black letters. The community held vigils, and the church bells rang softly on winter evenings. But for every candle lit in her memory, there was a growing shadow of fear. Parents no longer let their children walk alone. The sound of the rain on Exwick Lane, once comforting, now carried an unease that never really faded. Months turned into years. The case remained open, but hope began to thin. Detectives moved on to other cases, and the file grew thicker with reports, statements, and dead ends. Every few years, there would be renewed appeals, fresh posters, new faces on the investigation, but no arrests. Even as DNA technology improved, every sample came back empty. Whoever did this had left nothing behind, or had simply never been caught for anything else. And so, the silence deepened. Kate's parents continued to wait, their lives marked by that one November evening. Her classmates grew older, moved away, had families of their own, but none of them forgot. Because in the small, rain-soaked city of Exeter, Kate Bushell's name became something whispered with sadness and frustration. More than 2 decades later, the investigation remains open. Police still appeal for information, hoping that someone, somewhere, might finally break their silence. Because justice, no matter how long it takes, still waits at the edge of Exwick Lane. Beneath the same soft rain that once fell the night Kate Bushell walked her dog, and never came home. It's been more than 2 decades since that November evening in 1997. 20 years of questions. 20 years of silence. And still, the murder of Kate Bushell remains one of Devon's most haunting unsolved crimes. Over the years, detectives have returned to the case again and again, each time with new tools, new technology, and the same old hope that somewhere in the evidence lies the key they missed. In 2017, on the 20th anniversary, police reopened the case with fresh appeals. Advances in DNA testing had solved other mysteries once thought impossible, but here, progress came with heartbreak. The samples from the scene were too degraded, too touched by time and weather, too faint to speak clearly. Still, investigators persisted. They released age progression sketches of the man with reddish hair, the one witnesses described all those years ago. They re-interviewed locals, reviewed every statement, every scrap of evidence. Even the smallest detail, a car parked oddly, a stranger seen walking alone, was studied again, with the quiet desperation that comes from knowing that truth might still be within reach. But the truth never came. And the man with the orange hair never came forward. No one ever confessed. No one ever slipped up. The silence held. Some investigators believe Kate was the victim of an opportunist, a drifter or stranger who saw her walking that evening and acted on impulse. Others believe she was watched, that whoever did this knew the route she took, the time she walked, and how long she'd be alone. Both theories share one haunting detail: whoever it was vanished without a trace. For the people of Exeter, time has softened the pain, but not the unease. Exwick Lane remains a quiet road, lined with hedges and fields. Most days, it's empty, just the sound of wind in the grass, the distant hum of cars, and the ever-present patter of rain. But for those who remember, it will always carry something else. A weight. A silence that doesn't belong. Every year, on the anniversary of her death, locals still leave flowers near the field where she was found. Some are from people who knew her. Some from strangers, people who only know the story, who can't forget the image of a young girl in a blue jacket walking through the rain. And perhaps that's the most haunting part of all: how ordinary it was. How safe it should have been. How quickly safety turned to sorrow. The police still believe someone knows something. Someone saw a face, heard a word, remembered a van that didn't belong. And for reasons only they know, they've never spoken. Time changes everything, except the truth. Somewhere out there, someone still carries it. And one day, maybe, they'll find the courage to let it go. Until then, the rain keeps falling on Exwick Lane. The hedges grow taller. The city moves on. But the memory of Kate Bushell stays, quiet, gentle, and unforgotten. Because some mysteries never fade. They just wait, beneath the rain. As the rain falls over Devon tonight, someone out there still remembers. Maybe it's a retired detective who still keeps the case file on his desk, reading the reports when the nights are too long. Maybe it's a witness who saw something small, something they didn't think mattered. Or maybe, it's the person who knows exactly what happened that evening on Exwick Lane. More than 25 years have passed. The world has changed: technology, faces, even the way justice is sought. But one thing hasn't changed: the silence surrounding the murder of Kate Bushell. When you hear a story like this, it stays with you, not just because of the tragedy, but because of the emptiness left behind. Kate was just a girl walking her dog. No fame. No enemies. No reason for anyone to hurt her. And that's what makes her story so heavy. It reminds us that sometimes the darkest acts happen in the safest places, on the most ordinary days. But stories like this also remind us of something else: that the pursuit of truth never really ends. Every detective who worked the case, every local who lit a candle, every viewer who listens now, becomes part of that pursuit. Even now, a single detail, a quiet memory, a moment of conscience could be all it takes to bring peace to her family after all these years. So as you listen to the rain, and drift into that space between wake and sleep, remember Kate Bushell, not just as a victim, but as a voice that still asks to be heard. Because behind every unsolved mystery is a family still waiting, a story still unfolding, and a truth that deserves to be known. And maybe, somewhere tonight, the rain falls on Exwick Lane once more, washing away the years, whispering to anyone who will listen that justice, though quiet, is still waiting to be found. If this story moved you tonight, let it linger. Let it remind you that every unsolved mystery still carries a heartbeat, quiet, steady, waiting to be heard. Kate Bushell's story isn't just about loss. It's about the search for truth, and the people who refuse to stop looking for it. If you'd like to help keep her memory alive, share her story. Because sometimes, all it takes is one person, one listener, to bring forward the missing piece. One voice can change everything. And if you found comfort in tonight's story, stay here a little longer. There are more true crime stories to fall asleep to. Each one told gently, with care, for those who seek calm in the quiet. Subscribe, leave a thought in the comments, or simply rest, knowing that every story we tell brings us one step closer to peace. It began as a journey, a cross-country adventure filled with laughter, music, and the endless horizon of America's backroads. Gabby Petito, a young woman of 22, had dreams stitched into every mile she traveled. Her van was small, but it was home, her camera always ready, capturing moments that would last forever, or so it seemed. She was traveling with Brian Laundrie, her fiancé. Together, they mapped out a life on the open road, documenting their travels for family, friends, and the world. Social media followed them everywhere, TikTok videos of campfires, quiet streams, sunsets painting the sky in orange and gold. Theirs was a story of freedom, of exploration, a story that millions envied. But sometimes, the calmest journeys hide the sharpest edges. It was late summer, August 2021. The van rolled along winding roads, past fields of corn, through dense forests, under skies painted in the fading light of day. Gabby laughed as she filmed herself at a campsite, the sound of the fire crackling, rain beginning to patter lightly on the tent. It seemed ordinary, safe, peaceful. Yet, in those small, ordinary moments, shadows often linger unnoticed. The smiles, the cheerful footage, the perfect photographs, they told one story. But behind closed doors, tensions quietly simmered. Arguments that seemed small then, perhaps trivial, were pieces of a puzzle no one outside the van could yet see. By mid-August, the posts slowed. The videos stopped. A silence began to creep in across her social media, subtle but unsettling. Family and friends, sensing something was wrong, reached out, but the responses were irregular, inconsistent. The road that had been a symbol of freedom now seemed to carry an invisible weight, a tension that no hashtag or video could capture. Gabby's voice, once so vibrant in her vlogs, grew quieter in those final uploads. Every clip, every photo, captured what appeared to be normalcy, but when looked at closely, some small cracks were visible. And sometimes, the cracks are the loudest thing of all. Then, in late August, Gabby vanished. Her parents called police. Her family's worry became panic. The quiet of her cross-country trip transformed into a ripple that touched the nation. News outlets picked it up. Social media lit up with hashtags. Every viewer felt the tension of a story unfolding in real time, yet one that no one could fully control. Tonight, as you listen, imagine the van on a lonely road, the soft rain tapping against its roof. Imagine the open skies turning gray, the smell of damp pine and wet earth. Imagine the quiet anticipation of a girl who thought she was free to explore, not knowing that her story would soon turn into a mystery that would captivate millions. And in that silence, in the gentle sound of rainfall, we wait. We wait for answers, for truth, for justice. Because the journey that began with freedom ended in questions, leaving a shadow that still lingers on every mile of road she trod. Gabrielle Gabby Petito was 22, full of energy, dreams, and curiosity about the world. She grew up in a quiet town in Long Island, New York, surrounded by family and friends who remember her as bright, kind, and endlessly creative. From a young age, she loved music, photography, and storytelling, capturing the beauty of everyday life in a way that made others pause and notice. Her life seemed ordinary, yet filled with small adventures. Weekends spent with friends, family gatherings, and school projects, moments that built the foundation of who she was. Gabby was curious about people, about the world beyond her home. She wanted to see the mountains, the deserts, the vast highways stretching across the United States. Her ambition was simple: to live fully, to experience life in a way that few ever do. Her fiancé, Brian Laundrie, shared a similar love of adventure, though he was quieter, more reserved. Friends described him as charming in public, but private tensions between them sometimes existed, subtle disagreements, minor arguments, and unspoken frustrations. Together, they planned a cross-country road trip, documenting their travels along the way. The van they traveled in became both home and camera studio. It was a small, intimate space where every conversation, every moment of laughter, and every small frustration unfolded away from the eyes of the world. Gabby's social media presence made her story visible to millions. Her TikTok videos captured sunsets, campfires, scenic overlooks, and small details of life on the road, moments that seemed ordinary but magical in their simplicity. Followers connected with her energy, the way she narrated life with warmth and curiosity. She invited everyone along for the journey, letting them see the landscapes, the quiet streets of small towns, and the smiles she carried along the way. Yet, behind the camera, life is often more complex than it seems. The relationship between Gabby and Brian had its own rhythm, moments of joy, moments of tension, and, occasionally, moments that would later be seen as warning signs. Those nuances were private, tucked away in the quiet corners of the van and the long stretches of highway they traveled. Her family describes her as loving, empathetic, and full of life, someone who wanted to make the people around her feel seen and valued. It's that warmth that makes the story of her disappearance so haunting. Gabby's energy, her curiosity, and her love for life created a connection to the world that millions still feel today. Tonight, as the rain falls softly outside your window, picture her traveling those endless roads, the sound of tires on wet asphalt, the whisper of wind through the trees, and the quiet hope in her heart. Imagine the excitement, the freedom, the small joys of life on the road. This was Gabby Petito, young, alive, adventurous, and about to face a fate that would turn her journey into a story that the world could never forget. The journey began in early summer 2021. Gabby and Brian set out in their white van, a small home on wheels filled with supplies, cameras, and the excitement of adventure. Every mile was a promise, a new landscape, a new memory, a new story waiting to be captured. They traveled from New York, through the Midwestern plains, to the mountains of Colorado, and eventually to the wide-open deserts of Utah and Wyoming. Every campsite, every scenic overlook, became a small stage for Gabby's storytelling. She filmed herself laughing beside campfires, recording the way sunlight spilled over rocky cliffs, and capturing quiet moments with the van parked near lakes and forests. Her vlogs and TikTok videos radiated warmth and energy, a sense of freedom that millions of followers admired. Yet, even in the happiest moments, subtle tension lingered. In some videos, viewers noticed quiet arguments, pauses in conversation, or moments when Brian's expression seemed distant. In hindsight, these small signs hinted at the complexity behind the adventure. A dynamic between two people that the cameras could never fully capture. As they moved west, the van became a cocoon of both freedom and confinement. Long days on the road, close quarters, and the stresses of travel sometimes weighed on them. They navigated unfamiliar roads, weathered rainstorms and scorching heat, and faced the uncertainties of life on the road. Every mile brought beauty, but also challenges that tested patience and trust. Despite these subtle tensions, Gabby remained vibrant and engaged with the world around her. She wrote about the landscapes, the quiet moments under starry skies, and the small joys of road life. Followers saw the excitement of national parks, campgrounds, and hidden trails. Her presence felt alive, warm, and adventurous, a life fully lived. And then came the moments that would later draw attention. The pauses in posting. The missing updates. A few unsettling social media comments, a video filmed in quiet reflection, hints of unease that weren't fully understood at the time. The road stretched on, endless and uncertain. Mountains gave way to deserts, deserts to forests, and the van carried them through all of it, a small capsule of life, joy, and tension. Tonight, as the rain falls outside your window, imagine that van on a lonely stretch of highway. The hum of the engine mixing with the patter of rain, the wind whispering through trees, the lights fading into darkness. This was the world Gabby Petito traveled. Free, yet filled with small, hidden complexities. Every mile tells a story, every turn reveals a moment that, in retrospect, becomes part of a larger, haunting puzzle. And so, the journey continued, blissful to the outside world, yet quietly edging toward a tragedy that no one could have foreseen. By late August 2021, the adventure that had seemed so carefree began to shift in subtle ways. Gabby's social media posts slowed. The videos that once showed her smiling, laughing, and exploring quietly paused, leaving behind an unsettling silence. Her family noticed immediately. Calls went unanswered. Messages remained unopened. The worry that had been just a whisper became a growing fear. Something was wrong. On August 30th, Gabby's mother filed a missing persons report. Her parents' voices trembled as they recounted the last moments they knew she had been alive. The world watched in real time as law enforcement began piecing together a timeline, her route through Wyoming and Utah, her last known communications, and the stops she had made along the way. The investigation moved swiftly. Police interviewed campground staff, witnesses, and anyone who had crossed paths with Gabby or the van. A nationwide alert spread across social media. Hashtags appeared almost instantly, hashtag find Gabby, hashtag bring Gabby home, spreading awareness to millions. Search parties were organized. Volunteers combed through national parks and wooded areas, their flashlights cutting through the dim light of early autumn evenings. The rain fell softly in Wyoming, covering footprints, soaking tents, and washing the trails clean. Every searcher's heart carried a quiet urgency, a desperate hope that she would be found safe. Meanwhile, Brian Laundrie, Gabby's fiancé, returned home to Florida. Authorities sought answers. Statements conflicted. Details were unclear. He became a person of interest, and the focus of public attention shifted. News outlets followed every lead, every clue, and every report of sightings or unusual activity. The public watched, anxious, as law enforcement pieced together the puzzle. Despite extensive efforts, weeks passed with no confirmed sighting. The silence was heavy. The search expanded, federal agencies joined, dive teams explored waterways, and specialized search dogs combed the area. The world held its breath, hoping that the girl from Long Island, full of life and adventure, would be found. And then, on September 19, tragedy struck. Gabby's body was discovered in Grand Teton National Park. The joy and relief that the searchers hoped for never came. Instead, grief settled over her family, friends, and a nation that had followed her journey from the beginning. The investigation continued with quiet determination. Evidence was collected carefully, forensic teams examined every detail, and authorities worked to understand the events that led to her death. Each step was painstaking, deliberate, a slow unfolding of facts in a story that had captivated millions. Tonight, as the rain falls softly outside your window, imagine the search teams moving through forests and streams. Picture the quiet determination in their steps, the weight of hope and fear, and the stillness of the national parks as they combed every path. This was the moment when a carefree journey turned into a haunting mystery, leaving questions that the world is still trying to answer. After the discovery of Gabby Petito's body in Grand Teton National Park, the investigation shifted into high gear. Law enforcement teams worked meticulously, documenting the scene, photographing evidence, and interviewing everyone connected to her final days. The nation watched quietly, captivated, as the details slowly emerged. The autopsy confirmed the cause of death, homicide by strangulation. It was a fact that, while grim, provided clarity amidst the uncertainty. Gabby's life had been violently cut short, and the search for answers now became a matter of legal and moral urgency. Investigators turned their focus to Brian Laundrie, her fiancé. He had returned to Florida without Gabby, claiming he didn't know where she was. Authorities quickly identified him as a person of interest, noting discrepancies in his statements and inconsistencies in his story. Friends and family described him as quiet, private, and reserved, but investigators began to scrutinize his behavior with care and precision. Search efforts in Florida intensified. The Carlton Reserve, a vast nature preserve near his home, became a key location. Police scoured trails, waterways, and dense vegetation, searching for any sign of him or evidence linking him to Gabby's death. The landscape was challenging: marshes, thick woods, and winding paths. The rain, soft and persistent, made the work slower, washing away traces and leaving teams to rely on keen observation and methodical effort. Meanwhile, investigators combed through digital evidence. Texts, social media posts, and location data were analyzed to reconstruct the last days of their cross-country journey. Every post, every check-in, every minor detail became a potential clue. And while much was documented online, the truth of those final moments remained hidden behind closed doors. The search for Brian became national news. Authorities appealed to the public for information, sharing descriptions, and urging anyone with knowledge to come forward. Rumors and sightings were investigated carefully, but the mystery deepened. The quiet anticipation of a nation, watching from afar, mirrored the tension that had unfolded in the parks, campgrounds, and forests where the couple had traveled. Then, in October 2021, authorities confirmed Brian Laundrie had died in the Carlton Reserve. He had taken his own life, leaving questions unanswered, and leaving Gabby's family and the public with an uneasy closure. Although no trial or confession would follow, the forensic evidence had already documented the tragedy, preserving the details of what had happened in those final days. Tonight, as the rain falls softly outside your window, imagine the investigators moving carefully through forests, flashlights cutting through misty rain. Picture their quiet determination, the careful documentation of every step, every footprint, every small clue. The world may never know every detail, but their work ensures that Gabby's story, her life, her journey, and her final days, will not be forgotten. With Gabby Petito's death confirmed and Brian Laundrie's disappearance, the nation was left with a mixture of grief, outrage, and unanswered questions. The quiet road trip that had seemed like freedom had ended in tragedy, leaving a ripple that touched millions of lives. Authorities pieced together the timeline meticulously. Digital footprints, campsite logs, and witness statements slowly revealed the last days of Gabby's journey. The truth, while heartbreaking, offered closure. That she had been loved, adventurous, and full of life, and that her story deserved to be remembered accurately and respectfully. Brian Laundrie's death in the Carlton Reserve closed one chapter but left many questions unanswered. No trial would provide answers. No confession would explain the silence that had haunted her family. The case became a stark reminder of how quickly ordinary moments can turn tragic, and how fragile life can be even in seemingly safe surroundings. Gabby's family, friends, and supporters honored her memory through vigils, social media campaigns, and foundations in her name. Her story sparked national conversations about domestic violence, safety on the road, and the importance of listening when someone is missing. Her journey, though cut short, left a legacy of awareness and compassion. Tonight, as you listen to the rain tapping softly outside, imagine the forests, the highways, the quiet campgrounds where her life unfolded. Picture the investigators moving slowly through misty landscapes, the weight of responsibility in every careful step, and the soft determination to preserve her story. The world may not have all the answers, but her memory lives on, quietly, like the sound of rainfall, steady, persistent, and impossible to ignore. And as you drift into sleep, let this story linger not in fear, but in reflection. Gabby Petito's life, her dreams, and the journey she took are a reminder to cherish every moment, to value those around us, and to honor the lives of those who can no longer speak for themselves. As the rain falls quietly tonight, we remember Gabby Petito, not just for the tragedy that ended her journey, but for the life she lived. A young woman full of curiosity, kindness, and adventure. Her story reminds us that even in ordinary moments, life is precious and fragile. Though the case brought national attention and sparked countless discussions, the most important part is Gabby herself, her dreams, her laughter, the people who loved her. Her journey touched lives, inspired awareness about domestic violence, and reminded us to pay attention when someone is missing, when something feels wrong, and when voices quietly call for help. For those listening tonight, reflect on the fragility of life. Cherish the moments, the people, the connections that make each day meaningful. And remember, sometimes the smallest acts, a phone call, a message, a check-in, can make all the difference. If you feel moved by Gabby's story, share it gently. Keep her memory alive in your thoughts, in your conversations, in your quiet reflections. Even in sleep, her story carries a lesson. Vigilance, compassion, and care are never wasted. Subscribe to continue these calm, reflective journeys through true crime, where stories are told slowly, with care, and with respect for the lives behind them. And as you drift into rest tonight, let the rain soothe your mind, knowing that remembering Gabby Petito honors her life, her journey, and the hope that awareness brings. It was a cold February evening in 2004. The kind of night where the wind seems to bite through layers of clothing and the snow blankets the world in quiet stillness. For most, it was just another winter night in Haverhill, Massachusetts, but for Maura Murray, it would become the night that changed everything. Maura was a 21-year-old student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Athletic, intelligent, and independent, she had plans for a weekend getaway. She packed her small red Saturn into the back seat with essentials, snacks, clothes, and a sense of anticipation for a brief escape from campus life. Her friends remember her as lively, charming, and thoughtful. Family describes her as driven and caring, with a spark that made her both fearless and fiercely independent. That night, she left her dorm quietly. Perhaps she wanted to avoid attention, or maybe it was just her habit of handling things on her own. The snow had already begun to fall gently, covering roads and sidewalks in a soft, glistening layer. Streetlights cast pools of yellow light on icy pavement, and the occasional passing car left streaks of red and white fading into the distance. Maura's intended destination was her father's home in St. Louis, New Hampshire, a modest drive along familiar highways, though the winter weather made every turn uncertain. She stopped briefly at a convenience store, purchasing a few items. Cash or card, small gestures, mundane actions. But in hindsight, these became the last ordinary moments anyone would ever share with her. Her demeanor there was described as calm, but some noticed subtle signs of distraction or nervousness, a glance over the shoulder, a small pause before leaving. The roads were slick, coated with ice and patches of snow. Route 112 stretched ahead, a narrow, winding road through forested hills. The night was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes each sound, the wind in the trees, the faint hum of a passing vehicle, feel amplified. And then, somewhere along that road, the ordinary became extraordinary. Maura's car went off the road. A minor crash, evidence of tires skidding, a small dent in the side of her Saturn. She was seen moments later by a passerby or police, accounts vary, standing near the vehicle, speaking on her phone. Was she asking for help? Trying to call someone she trusted? Or was this simply a pause in her journey, nothing more? No one would know for certain. After that, Maura vanished. The forest seemed to swallow her whole. Snow drifted into the tracks she left behind, erasing evidence almost as quickly as it was made. The night carried on, indifferent to the absence of one young woman. Her car remained, abandoned on the side of the road, a silent testament to the mystery unfolding. Tonight, as you listen to the rain, or the soft patter of imagined snow on the roof, imagine the stillness of that New Hampshire night. Picture Maura, alone, navigating icy roads, surrounded by towering pines and the hush of falling snow. Imagine the uncertainty in the air, the quiet suspense that comes when a life changes in a single, fleeting moment. Her story is one of curiosity, independence, and the unknown. It begins like many ordinary nights, yet ends with questions that echo through the years. Questions that remain unanswered. Who saw her? Where did she go? And why did the night close in around her, leaving nothing but mystery behind? Maura Murray was 21, a student at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, full of life, intelligence, and ambition. She excelled in her studies, particularly in nursing, a field she chose because of her desire to help others. Friends described her as independent, adventurous, and always ready to embrace new experiences. Family remembered a young woman who was both thoughtful and strong-willed, someone who carried her own convictions quietly but confidently. Growing up in a loving household, Maura learned responsibility and compassion. Her parents supported her dreams, encouraged her independence, and nurtured her curiosity about the world. Siblings remember a sister who was protective, attentive, and full of life, someone whose presence brightened ordinary moments. Her circle of friends spoke often about her sense of humor, her quick smile, and the ease with which she connected with people. Yet, like all of us, Maura had her complexities. She was introspective at times, thoughtful about her decisions, and fiercely private in some areas of her life. While many admired her confidence, few truly knew the depths of her inner world, the thoughts she carried silently, the fears and hopes she weighed alone. It is this combination of independence and privacy that makes her story so compelling, and also so haunting. Maura's social life was vibrant but measured. She enjoyed spending time with friends, traveling, and exploring the outdoors. She loved road trips and the freedom that came with driving through the countryside, forests, and small towns that dotted New England. These trips gave her a sense of control, of escape, and of connection with the world outside the confines of daily life. Her winter trip in February 2004 was meant to be one such escape, a weekend getaway to recharge and reflect. But the choices she made, from packing her car to the roads she took, would place her in circumstances that no one could have predicted. Every step she took that night, the turn onto Route 112, the decision to stop, the moments spent outside her vehicle, became a fragment of a larger, unsolved puzzle. Maura was more than a college student on a snowy night. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, and a presence in the lives of those who loved her. Her energy, curiosity, and independence were what made her remarkable, and they are the qualities that continue to draw attention to her story years later. Tonight, as you listen to the gentle fall of snow, imagine Maura preparing for her trip. Picture her carefully packing essentials into her car, checking maps, and imagining the quiet roads ahead. Hear the soft crunch of snow under her boots, the distant hum of traffic, and the whisper of winter wind through pine branches. Every small detail, every ordinary action, was part of the life of a young woman whose journey would soon become a mystery that captivated a nation. Her story reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of attention, care, and empathy. Even in moments that seem routine, the unexpected can occur, and the ordinary can transform into a lasting mystery. Maura Murray's life, her independence, and her dreams deserve remembrance, reflection, and respect. The night of February 9, 2004 began quietly, like any other winter evening in New England. The roads were slick with ice, the forests heavy with snow, and the world wrapped in a hush that only midwinter can bring. For Maura Murray, it was meant to be the start of a short weekend escape, a trip to clear her mind and reconnect with herself. She left her dorm at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in the early evening, her small red Saturn packed with essentials, clothing, and a quiet sense of anticipation. The drive north toward her father's home in St. Louis, New Hampshire, was familiar yet carried the uncertainty of winter roads. Streetlights cast reflections on icy pavement, creating a patchwork of gold and gray that stretched into the distance. The quiet hum of her tires on the asphalt was the only sound breaking the winter stillness. A stop at a convenience store along the way marked one of her last known public interactions. She purchased a few items, drinks, snacks, supplies for the road. Her demeanor seemed calm, though some would later note a hint of distraction, a nervous glance over her shoulder, a pause in her movements that hinted at something just beyond understanding. These small moments, mundane to the casual observer, became fragments of a timeline that would later be scrutinized endlessly. Continuing on Route 112, a winding road through forests and hills, Maura's journey took a sudden and chilling turn. The Saturn skidded on icy patches, leaving tracks etched briefly into the snow. A minor collision occurred, a slide into the roadside embankment that left her vehicle disabled. It was here, on that quiet, snow-covered stretch of highway, that the ordinary became extraordinary. Witnesses reported seeing her near the vehicle, speaking on her cell phone. Her posture, gestures, and expressions were ordinary yet tense, an unspoken weight in the cold night air. Did she try to call for help? Or was she merely assessing her situation, thinking through her options? No one could know for certain, and that uncertainty would come to define the night. The surrounding woods, thick with pines and blanketed in snow, swallowed her presence. Tracks in the fresh snow faded quickly, erased by wind or falling flakes, leaving little trace of where she might have gone. The quiet of the forest seemed to stretch endlessly, a stillness that both comforts and unnerves, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Emergency responders arrived soon after, yet the trail was already cold. Searches began immediately, but the night offered challenges. Icy conditions, freezing temperatures, and dense forests made the task nearly impossible. Every second counted, yet the cold and darkness seemed to conspire against certainty. Tonight, as you listen to the soft fall of snow outside your window, imagine the silence of that winter night. Picture Maura standing beside her car, wind brushing against her face, snow settling on her shoulders, her breath visible in the icy air. Every detail of that night, every sound of the forest, every crunch of snow beneath boots, became part of the story that would haunt the community, the family, and the nation. Her disappearance was sudden, quiet, and complete. A young life full of promise, ambition, and curiosity vanished into the winter night, leaving only questions, footprints, and the echo of a mystery that continues to linger. The moment Maura Murray failed to arrive at her intended destination, concern grew quietly but steadily. Her parents noticed her absence, reaching out first by phone, then by email, and eventually through messages left unanswered. What began as a pause in communication quickly became a gnawing worry, the kind that grows heavier with each passing hour. Local authorities were notified on February 9 and 10, 2004, when Maura's absence became apparent. The Amherst Police Department and then the New Hampshire State Police began piecing together a timeline of her journey. Her car, discovered along Route 112, became the first tangible clue in a case that would soon ripple across the region. The small red Saturn sat quietly, its hazard lights off, a faint trace of human presence frozen in the cold winter night. Search teams mobilized immediately. Local law enforcement, neighbors, and volunteers ventured into the snow-covered forests, scanning the roads and trails with flashlights cutting through the dim winter darkness. K9 units were brought in, their noses trained to detect scents carried in the biting cold air. Every footprint in the snow, every disturbance of the landscape, was carefully noted, yet the snowfall itself seemed to erase the trail almost as quickly as it was made. The search was slow, painstaking, and meticulous. Crews combed dense woods, icy embankments, and hidden paths, moving quietly to preserve any trace of Maura. Every sound, the crunch of boots on snow, the soft hum of flashlights, the whisper of wind, became part of the ambient canvas of that winter night. It was a scene of both hope and tension, as searchers pushed through fatigue, freezing temperatures, and uncertainty, driven by the urgent desire to find a young woman who had vanished into the darkness. Meanwhile, the public began to take notice. Local media covered the initial search efforts, reporting the facts in sober tones: a missing college student, a car abandoned on a snowy road, a community coming together to find her. Soon, the story spread beyond New Hampshire, capturing national attention. Social media was in its early days, but forums and online communities began discussing Maura's disappearance, sharing timelines, sightings, and speculations. The quiet town was suddenly the center of a story that would persist for years, and millions of people were drawn into the mystery without even realizing it. Family and friends organized vigils and appeals, each attempt a beacon of hope. They urged anyone with information to come forward, holding on to the possibility, however slim, that Maura might still be found. The snow fell relentlessly, coating roads and forests, a soft reminder of the passage of time and the fragility of every trail left behind. Even as daylight broke over the trees and mountains, the questions remained: where was Maura Murray? Who had last seen her? What had happened on that quiet winter road? The police reports, witness statements, and search records became a growing tapestry of effort and uncertainty. Every sighting, every clue, no matter how small, was logged and cross-referenced. Yet, despite the painstaking work, the cold night had swallowed her presence, leaving only a car, a stretch of road, and a haunting absence that resonated in every corner of the community. Tonight, as you listen to the gentle fall of snow outside your window, imagine the search parties moving slowly through the frozen forests. Picture their breath visible in the cold air, flashlights slicing through darkness, and the quiet determination in every step. Imagine the families waiting, hoping, praying, and the calm patience of winter that seemed to stretch endlessly around them. Maura Murray's disappearance was sudden, silent, and complete. Yet the search, the hope, and the desire for answers became a quiet testament to human care, persistence, and the yearning to understand what had happened. And though the night held its secrets tightly, the world had begun watching, listening, and remembering, setting the stage for an investigation that would continue for years to come. With Maura Murray's car discovered on Route 112, the investigation shifted into careful, methodical action. Law enforcement sought to reconstruct the hours leading up to her disappearance, examining every detail, every movement, and every interaction. The cold February night offered few clues, and the snowy landscape complicated the search, erasing footprints and obscuring evidence. Police began by interviewing witnesses in the area. Gas station attendants recalled her purchase earlier in the evening, snacks, drinks, and perhaps a moment of hesitation. Drivers passing along the icy road reported seeing her car parked off the roadway, sometimes with no one in sight, sometimes with a fleeting figure nearby. Each account was logged meticulously, though inconsistencies naturally appeared, leaving gaps in the timeline that would never fully close. Investigators examined her phone, emails, and personal records to understand her state of mind and intentions. Nothing definitive pointed to foul play, yet the sudden disappearance, combined with the accident on the icy road, suggested multiple possibilities. Had she left voluntarily? Was she disoriented after the crash? Or was there someone else involved, hidden in the shadows of that quiet night? Each theory carried its own weight, its own quiet tension, and each was considered carefully, with the hope of finding the truth. As the search continued, online communities began to form around the case. Though social media was not as widespread as it would become, forums and message boards carried discussions, theories, and speculation. Some believed she had disappeared intentionally, seeking a new life. Others suggested the accident or an unknown assailant could have been involved. The variety of theories reflected the uncertainty surrounding her disappearance. A puzzle with pieces that seemed never to fit perfectly. The police examined her recent history and relationships. Maura had been independent, sometimes secretive, and occasionally impulsive, traits that could explain certain actions but not her disappearance entirely. They also considered environmental factors, the icy roads, the isolated stretch of forest, the cold winter night that could quickly become dangerous. Even small missteps, combined with harsh conditions, could have catastrophic results. As days turned into weeks, the search and investigation revealed nothing definitive. Evidence remained elusive, the snowy forest keeping its secrets tightly. Yet each discovery, no matter how small, was a testament to the dedication of law enforcement and volunteers. Every tire track, every witness statement, every clue from her personal belongings was carefully documented, building a timeline that, though incomplete, preserved the story of Maura Murray's final known moments. Tonight, as you listen to the gentle fall of snow outside your window, imagine investigators moving slowly through frozen forests. Picture them pausing to examine footprints, noting the delicate imprint in snow softened by wind and snowfall. Hear their careful voices, low and measured, as they discuss possibilities, consider theories, and work tirelessly to reconstruct a night that had grown silent and mysterious. Though the true sequence of events remains unknown, the investigation itself is a testament to human care, patience, and the pursuit of truth. Maura Murray's disappearance is not only a story of uncertainty but also a story of persistence, of those who refuse to let a life vanish quietly without acknowledgement or remembrance. Theories abound, questions linger, and the winter landscape keeps its secrets, yet the story continues, quietly, patiently, waiting for understanding that may never fully come. Weeks turned into months, and the search for Maura Murray gradually shifted from immediate response to long-term investigation. Her car remained on the side of Route 112, a silent witness to the events of that cold February night. Snow melted and refroze, erasing footprints and washing away any fleeting traces of her presence. The quiet of the forest seemed almost indifferent, holding its secrets as tightly as ever. Law enforcement continued to piece together what they could. Interviews, witness accounts, phone records, and her personal belongings were all carefully documented. Yet, no definitive answer emerged. Maura's disappearance became a perplexing puzzle, a series of choices and events that left investigators with more questions than answers. Her family endured each passing day with a mixture of hope, anxiety, and grief. Parents, siblings, and close friends never gave up searching, never stopped asking questions. Vigils were held, posters were displayed, and media coverage ensured her story remained in the public consciousness. The community around her, neighbors, volunteers, and strangers drawn to the mystery, participated in searches, keeping alive the possibility that she might still be found. Online communities, amateur investigators, and concerned individuals contributed theories, sometimes contradicting each other. Some believed Maura had chosen to disappear intentionally, seeking a new life elsewhere. Others suggested she had fallen victim to the harsh winter conditions or some unknown danger along the remote roads. Every theory was weighed with cautious interest, but none provided closure. The forest, snow, and time itself seemed to guard the truth, leaving only fragments of a story that refuses to be fully understood. Years have passed, and the case remains unsolved. Maura Murray's disappearance is one of the enduring mysteries of the modern age, a young woman who vanished into the night, leaving behind a trail of questions that still echo. Her story serves as a reminder of the fragility of life, the unpredictability of choices, and the quiet power of absence. Tonight, as you listen to the soft fall of snow outside your window, imagine the road she traveled, the trees that lined her path, and the stillness of the forests that might have witnessed her last moments. Picture the search teams walking slowly through icy underbrush, flashlights slicing through darkness, K9 units sniffing the frozen air, and the families waiting, holding on to hope in the fading winter light. Though the answers remain unknown, the impact of her disappearance endures. It has inspired awareness, vigilance, and empathy. It reminds us to cherish life, to pay attention to those around us, and to honor the memory of a young woman whose curiosity and independence touched so many. In the quiet, snow-covered forests of New Hampshire, Maura Murray's story remains. A story of mystery, persistence, and the enduring hope that one day, even the most elusive answers may come to light. Until then, her absence lingers like the soft snowfall, persistent, silent, and impossible to ignore. As the snow continues to fall quietly tonight, we pause to remember Maura Murray, not only for the mystery of her disappearance but for the life she lived before that winter night. A young woman full of curiosity, intelligence, and independence, Maura's story reminds us of the fragility of life and the importance of connection, care, and awareness. Though the details of that February evening remain unknown, the search and investigation show the quiet dedication of those who refused to let her story fade. Family, friends, volunteers, and investigators kept hope alive, combing forests, icy roads, and snowy trails, guided by compassion and determination. Their efforts remind us that even in the coldest, quietest moments, people are willing to act, to care, and to remember. For those listening tonight, reflect on the ordinary moments in your life, the small gestures, the connections with friends and loved ones, the attention we give to each other. Sometimes, it is these small acts that matter most. If you feel moved by Maura's story, share it gently. Keep her memory alive in conversations, thoughts, or quiet reflections. Subscribe to continue these calm, reflective journeys through true crime, stories told slowly, with care, and with respect for the lives behind them. As you drift into sleep, let the snow falling softly outside your window and the gentle night ambience remind you to cherish every moment, to hold your loved ones close, and to honor the lives of those whose stories continue to quietly linger in the world.